In May 1945, the physical architecture of the Third Reich was reduced to smoldering ash, but the arrogant psychology of the German elite had not yet been fully broken. As hundreds of thousands of German generals, colonels, and senior bureaucrats were herded into Allied prisoner-of-war camps, a massive, collective coping mechanism began to spread among the captured officer class. They whispered to each other in the wire enclosures, cultivating a bitter, elitist narrative. They told themselves that they had not been defeated by superior soldiers, nor by better generals. They believed they had simply been overwhelmed by the mindless, brute force mathematics of American mass production. To the aristocratic German mindset, the Americans were a nation of culturally bankrupt factory workers and crude cowboys. The Germans genuinely believed that while the United States possessed infinite steel and gasoline, the Americans entirely lacked European refinement, historical pedigree, and the aristocratic capacity to appreciate the true spoils of a conquered empire. General George S. Patton, the brilliant, theatrical, and ruthlessly well-educated commander of the American Third Army, understood exactly what the German elite were whispering. He knew that to permanently pacify the German nation, destroying their tanks was not enough. He had to completely destroy their cultural superiority complex. He had to prove that the Americans were not just mechanics, they were the new Caesars. And he chose to execute this psychological demolition using the absolute pride and joy of German engineering, the Deutsche Reichsbahn, the state railway. To understand the sheer magnitude of Patton's insult, one must understand what the German luxury trains represented. During the war, the highest echelons of the Nazi government, Adolf Hitler, Hermann Göring, Heinrich Himmler, and the High Command, did not travel in standard rail cars. They traveled in Sonderzüge, special trains. These were literally rolling palaces, heavily armored masterpieces of Art Deco engineering. Hermann Göring's personal train, codenamed Asian, was the stuff of legend. It featured cars paneled in Brazilian mahogany and polished brass. It contained massive dining cars with crystal chandeliers, private cinemas, deep soaking bathtubs, and communication centers that rivaled the best intelligence hubs in Berlin. The trains were operated by a hand-picked, elite cadre of the most senior, loyal, and arrogant railway technocrats in the German Reich. When the war ended, many of these magnificent rail cars were found hidden in tunnels or stranded on rural sidings across Bavaria and Austria. Standard American military procedure dictated that these cars either be dismantled for scrap or assigned to boring, bureaucratic administrative duties. Patton had a vastly different vision. He decided that the commander of the conquering Third Army required a mobile headquarters that reflected his status. He ordered his staff to comb through the wreckage of the German railway network, locate the absolute finest luxury cars belonging to the Nazi elite, and assemble them into a single, breathtaking American supertrain. But Patton's true masterstroke was not simply taking the train, it was who he ordered to run it. Patton did not assign American mechanics and army cooks to operate his new luxury locomotive. Instead, he summoned the captured, high-ranking directors of the Deutsche Reichsbahn and former German logistics officers. These were men of high status. They were aristocratic engineers who held equivalent ranks to generals, men who used to dictate the timetables of an empire that stretched from France to Russia. They were brought into American command posts, expecting to be treated as high-level consultants, perhaps asked to assist the Americans in rebuilding the civilian infrastructure. Instead, Patton's deputies handed them an impossible, deeply humiliating ultimatum. The American orders were violently blunt. You are going to assemble the greatest luxury train in Europe for General Patton. You will use Göring's dining car, Hitler's sleeper cars, and Himmler's communication cars. And once it is built, you, the former directors of the Reichsbahn, will personally operate it, maintain it, and serve the American officers aboard it. The instructions came with a terrifying caveat. The Americans demanded absolute, flawless perfection, white glove service. The crystal must be spotless, the mahogany must be polished daily, and the train must run with absolute, to-the-minute precision. If the train arrived at a destination even 3 minutes late, or if a single American officer was served cold coffee, the German railway directors would be immediately stripped of their positions, thrown into a heavy labor POW camp, and forced to break rocks on the Autobahn. For the German technocrats, this was a psychological nightmare. They were abruptly, violently shoved from the top of the European social hierarchy to the absolute bottom. The men who had spent the last 5 years planning the movement of entire panzer armies were now sweating profusely over the exact temperature of General Patton's breakfast sausages. Highly decorated German engineering officers were reduced to running frantically along the train platforms, screaming at their subordinates to ensure that the exterior armor of the train was washed and polished until it shined like a mirror, simply because an American general might glance out the window. The psychological weight of the timetable was particularly devastating. The Germans prided themselves on extreme punctuality. Now, that punctuality was weaponized against them. American quartermasters would casually hand the German directors a route slip, demanding the train travel across hundreds of miles of bombed-out, ruined track and arrive exactly at 1400 hours. The American officers didn't care how the Germans achieved it. They didn't care about the collapsed bridges, the lack of coal, or the destroyed signaling equipment. They simply demanded the result. And terrified of being sent to the latrine details of a prison camp, these brilliant German engineers worked themselves to the bone, performing logistical miracles just to ensure Patton's private bar was fully stocked and arrived on time. The visual contrast of this arrangement shattered the German officer class completely. As Patton's luxury train rolled across the devastated landscape of southern Germany, the starving, defeated German populace would gather at the rail crossings to watch it pass. Inside the train, they didn't see the stern, austere faces of the Nazi high command. Instead, they saw young, relaxed American combat officers resting their combat boots on Hermann Göring's silk sofas. They saw General Patton sitting in the very dining chair that the Nazi leadership used to plot the conquest of the world, casually smoking a cigar and drinking vintage French champagne. And standing nervously in the corner of that dining car, holding a silver tray and waiting for permission to speak, was a formerly elite German officer. The Americans had inverted the entire social order of the Third Reich. The self-proclaimed master race had been reduced to a frightened catering company. To the German officers aboard, it was an agonizing daily ritual of subjugation. They realized that the Americans were not uncultured barbarians. They were emperors. The Americans knew exactly how to enjoy the absolute finest luxuries the world had to offer, and they possessed the infinite, cold-blooded power to force their vanquished enemies to serve it to them. Patton's luxury train was not simply a product of ego. It was a deeply calculated instrument of psychological warfare. Patton understood history. He understood that the Romans did not simply defeat their enemies. They brought the enemy kings back to Rome in chains and forced them to walk in a triumph. By commandeering the ultimate symbols of Nazi wealth and forcing the German elite to act as his personal servants, Patton permanently broke the spell of Prussian superiority. He proved that the United States Army was completely, indisputably sovereign over the German nation. The German officers who served on Patton's train could no longer return to the prisoner camps and whisper about their cultural superiority. They had to admit the crushing truth. They had been beaten industrially. They had been beaten militarily. And finally, they had been completely domesticated. The American cowboy had walked into their grandest palace, kicked his boots up on the table, and made the lords of the Third Reich fetch him a drink.